Good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. For your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people, like most of you out there, about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is that we've decided to talk about. And this evening, we're going to talk about student activist Cameron Whitten and what he's been up to and what he's up to. What do you got on your head? Cameron, you're bad. Take that off. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
This is a recorder on Halloween. Thanks for coming on the show
my
again.
Best intro ever. Thank you, Don.
You betcha. Cameron's been on the show in the past, and he's had an interesting career. That's why he's on again. And he's been through some real adventures since the last time he was a guest on the show. And we want to talk about that and whatever else you want to talk about, because whatever you talk about has always been interesting. I've gotten good feedback about it. Thank you so much. As you know, the first half of the show is the bio segment, and it's been a while since we've talked about who you are personally. So let's just start off all over again, all right?
Months. Okay.
Some new viewers. If I would ask your best friend, who is Cameron Whitten? What would your best friend say? Cameron Whitten is... Finish that.
Probably start off with Cameron Whitten has really smelly feet.
What is he, though?
He's an activist. He's a student. He's a young black man living in Portland, Oregon. He's got energy. He's passionate.
Yeah.
Things like that.
That's good stuff. Yeah, I've experienced that with you. My hat's off to you just from the work you've done here as an activist and where your heart's at and what you're doing. And thank you so much. A lot more of us need to have the kind of courage that you do. So we'll get into that later on after we learn more about who you are personally. Okay. And you were born when and where?
I was born in April 1991. I'm in Aries. I was born in Secaucus, New Jersey, and that's a pig farm. So,
is it still there?
It's still there, you know, unless your Hurricane Sandy, completely obliterated it, which is a chance. But I actually grew up in Northern Virginia, so.
And why were you born?
Well, you know, it wasn't an accident like my brother. You know, I'm at least happy about that.
Your brother was an accident?
My brother was an accident.
But why were you born then?
Well, I'm the youngest in my family, and I suppose that I think my mom, what she wanted was another girl, because right now we only have one girl, and that's my oldest sister, and they thought I was going to be a girl, actually. I was supposed to be named Serena. So if I ever do drag, I know what I'll call myself. But, you know, fortunately I had one of these, so things changed last minute.
It's a family show, remember?
Yeah.
So how'd you get that first name, Cameron?
Well, my mom, she wanted to have a child whose name was C. My oldest brother's name is Anthony. Then there's my sister, Brittany. And then my brother's name is Bryant. So they messed up somehow. And so I got stuck with C.
What do you think of that name?
Well, I know when she picked it, she didn't want anybody to look at my resume and assume that, you know, I'm not somebody else, if you know what I mean. So she pretty much picked the name of a white man. And that really says a lot about racial dynamics and how they still affect people in America today.
Did you like your name?
As long as you don't cut it short, because I don't like Cam or Cammy or anything like else, or Cam or Cammy Cam, or Ka, man, or whatever. Cameron, I think, is a decent name. I've been going by it for 21 years. It hasn't bothered me yet. So
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. And I know when I was a kid and they called me Donald, I was in trouble. Don't call me Donald ever.
Ooh,
and
that's my grandfather's name.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. And my middle name is Christian, but being a Catholic kid, when I was born, the priest decided to fill out the paperwork, and they wanted to have a saint name as the first name. So it wasn't until many years later on when I was an adult, I discovered that legally I am Christian Donald Baham, but I go by Don. But you can call me, never mind. How about your cultural heritage? Any significant about your cultural heritage that's worth reporting to the viewers?
I was raised Presbyterian.
Presbyterian, huh?
Yeah.
And what are you now, religious-wise?
Well, my home church is the Unitarian Church. So I believe that's where I strongly identify with.
Yeah. And your education, your formal education, you're in school now?
Yes.
Oh,
Taking
wow.
19 credits.
19 credits?
Yeah.
My gosh. How you doing?
Well, still surviving. Hasn't killed me off yet.
Yeah. And do you have a partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever?
Solo.
Too busy, huh?
Yeah, I'm a free agent.
Are you available?
I wouldn't say no.
Did you hear that? He's available. Your political persuasion, are you a Tea Partier? Or
I like to call myself conservatively progressive.
wait a minute now. Conservatively progressive.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Oh, no. I'm most progressive on Sundays.
All right. Memberships in political, social, or civic organizations. Any memberships you claim that you feel like telling the viewers about? I know a few that you belong to.
I try to be involved in a lot of little things. I don't think there's anything like member too much. It's like I just have a lot of tentacles. I got a little, I've got a stamp in every single group. So I get around.
Mm-hmm. But you ran for mayor.
Yes.
Of Portland, Oregon, here, because our show is being shown around the world. And was there a party affiliation with your candidacy?
City elections are not nonpartisan.
Oh, yes.
But I did receive the endorsements of the Oregon Progressive Party and the Portland Green Party.
Mm-hmm. So, all right. Name three things going on now that are important to discuss. Three things going on in the community or the state or the world or whatever that would be useful for us to talk about right now.
Well, for me, the next week is still just laser focused on the election coming up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really where my attention is. General election, a few days. Actually, I just came back from the bus project. They were doing their trick or vote today, where they were knocking on doors, engaging with neighbors, and telling them, you have a few more days to get your ballot in. So we have a lot of involvement and engagement here, and I'm really excited about that.
What is the bus project?
The bus project is an organization. It's a nonprofit which is designed to get more youth engaged in politics, and they do that by talking about issues that affect youth by, holding many workshops and talking to kids at their colleges or the local high school, really being where youth are and most likely to listen. So it's a pretty unique organization, and I believe that it's done a lot for the state of Oregon, and it's also demonstrated that it's able to expand and exist in other places across the nation. So.
And before I forget, I want to thank you for coming on the show because you've got a little bug going on. You've got a bit of a temperature. I checked you a few minutes ago, and you came on anyhow, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you see the mainstream media? Is it left, right, or centrist, or what?
Well, it depends on the channel, but
generally speaking,
I would say it's central.
Okay. And do you read, view, or listen to alternative media of any kind?
Most of my reading is looking up articles on Google. So I stay really locally, centric. I read Oregonian, Willamette Week, Mercury, Tribune. So, some of those are
local papers.
Yeah.
What's right with America today? Name me two or three things that are right. That's right with America today.
There is. I don't want to say this without it being completely incorrect, but I would say that the amount of civil liberties you can have in America are higher than other places you can have in the world. Yeah. Pretty much than any other nation. I'm not saying that everybody has civil liberties, but at a certain status, you can have so many freedoms that you could not be able to have access to if you were living in any other country.
Yes.
So I think that's a great thing that we have in the country. A second thing?
Yes.
Oh, man. I would say we have a lot of great entertainment, I suppose. We're still the entertainment hub. Everybody looks at us for music, movies, books, all kinds of stuff. So I would say culturally, we are still a very strong nation. And the third thing, we're becoming more diverse, I would say. The fact that we are really seeing so much more diversity and so much more talk about equity, I think that this is something that, has been waiting to happen in America for a very long time.
Okay. How about our climate as compared to Siberia or someplace like that?
Hurricane Sandy, it devastates me. And I remember when I first moved to Portland, and that was 3 years ago, my hometown in Virginia was a part of the big blizzard that shook everybody. And just seeing year after year, there's always been some new crazy weather catastrophe going on. And we're still trying to have this fight about whether climate change is really happening. So it's just kind of saddens me to see where we are scientifically.
Yeah. So tick off 3 things that are wrong with America. That's the other side of the coin. You're only limited to 3. You can't go for 34.
I would say pollution. That's a big one. Probably the biggest polluters per capita.
What kind of pollution concerns you most?
Oh, man, that's a good question. Probably say air pollution, especially in the urban areas.
Yeah.
I think that we have the technologies, we have the resources available to become less coal dependent, to have electric vehicles, and to make sure that we have light efficient light bulbs and whatnot, energy efficient light bulbs and whatnot, but we are not connecting 2 and 2 together. So that's something that America could really move forward on, really investing on being more sustainable and really holding higher standards, because this is all going to be downstream costs when people have to go to the hospitals and say, oh, I've got lung problems, I have asthma, my bones are feeling brittle. Like, all this has to connect. So we would save so much more money if we really addressed the issues now instead of waiting when people are sick and are about to die. So that's what my frustration is.
And the air pollution, yeah. What else is wrong with America?
The second one I was probably going to say is, we have a political system that disenfranchises people. We have a lot of money in politics. We have a 2-party system, which doesn't really allow for diverse opinions to get out. I would probably say that we need to look at what our Constitution said 200 years ago and how much of that is still optimally affecting us. Where can we improve? What can we still have the spirit of our founding fathers while realizing that society is completely different apparition than what it used to be?
Do you think we should have a constitutional convention?
Yes.
Some people say, heavens, you don't know what you're going to get when you do that, but you still think we should have one?
Yes.
Okay. What else is wrong?
What would be the third thing I said? Economic inequality. The top 2% in America have steadily been making so much more than the bottom 98%. And the common worker, their wage increases have been lower than the rate of inflation. So that means people have been getting poorer, while many other people, especially the banks that receive trillions of dollars in bailouts, they've been able to keep all this money to themselves in a liquidity trap, and it's prevented so many human beings from accessing the resources they need to prosper. So I would probably want to address the issues of our minimum wage laws and looking at how we really allocate resources and who is really accessing these tax abatement programs and all the other things. So.
How do we fix what's wrong with America?
I would say that what's wrong with America is not a political issue. It's really a cultural issue. There is just too much emphasis on sensory details, and there's not really enough intrinsic reflection on who we are and our relationship to the environment around us. it would take a strong movement. We've seen a lot of movements try to, spur up in the last few years, but it hasn't really been able to latch on and be completely embraced culturally. But that, I feel like, is going to be the determining factor of how we survive our current culture war. People really have to stop what they're doing and really start examining who they are, what's happening around them, and what they can do to fix it.
How much does the media, what kind of influence does the media have in how people think and how they behave, and considering what needs to be done to have America be a better place to live?
Well, the media plays a big role in that, and that's the reason why our founding fathers talked about it. That's the reason why we still have huge debates about it now. What role does the media play? A lot of people say that the media is the fourth branch of the government. I believe that there is some understanding or comprehension about such a statement, considering that the media is able to reach so many bigger congregations of constituents than any other institution, and the power of information by far is greater than any other might or power someone might be able to have. So I would say that the media currently focuses not on educating people or informing them, but it really has become really tabloid.
An instrument of the ruling class? That's just my opinion.
I wouldn't say it's completely that, but I would say that it has, received its. The issue is media exists to be successful, financially successful and profitable. There's very little media, except for PBS, which might be cut or not, depends on who gets elected as president. But most media, they need to have something that's sellable, and tabloids are sellable. Telling somebody, what kind of tax programs exist, what's happening with school funding, telling people, what environmental problem is affecting their local watershed, that's not as profitable. You can't get the same out of that. And so I see still the cultural barrier that people have to overcome if they really want to make the important changes that we need to bring to the table.
What about class warfare? Is there class warfare going on in our country today?
I try to stay away from the most violent words. I feel like it is much more accurate, much more sensible to say that there is class stratification. I believe we do have social hierarchies, and a person's quality of living in almost every aspect of their life is determined by their income level. And we've seen many more people have less of a control over their personal aspects because they have become poorer and poorer. And that has created huge amounts of, tense emotions between what we call the poor working class to what you might call the ruling class. And it hasn't come out to blows just yet, but we do have huge segregation of people who do not comprehend each other and do not have the same realities or perceptions around them.
You ran for mayor, and why did you do that?
Well,
mayor of Portland, Oregon.
Yeah. I was involved in the Occupy Portland demonstration. I was in the very first march. I slept out in the parks all 39 plus days. I even managed to get arrested a few times.
I notice you smile when you say that.
I'm still going through court, so I don't know why I'm smiling. Oh, man. Taking a long time.
So you're still dealing with the authorities because of that?
Yeah.
What's going to happen with that? Do you have any idea?
Well, we just found out that we're eligible for jury trials. They demoted our charges from a misdemeanor to a violation, and for that reason, they were able to strip us of our, constitutional rights. And then the appeals court, with a separate court case, they reversed that. They said that the judges can't, or the plaintiffs cannot do that, which would be the state government. They cannot demote our rights and then refuse us to have a jury trial. If we are being charged with a certain thing, then we get those jury rights regardless. So that's currently what's happening, which is going to make this trial much longer and much more expensive than before.
And who's paying your expenses?
Well, I am being represented pro bono with a lawyer I got through the National Lawyers Guild.
So you have representation?
Yeah. He's a smart guy.
He's a smart guy?
Yeah.
Yeah. So any idea how long it'll be before it comes to trial?
Well, my next trial date is for when I got arrested in the world's smallest park. That's Mill Inns Park, and that's on November 28th.
What park was that you got arrested in?
Mill Inns Park.
Mill Inns Park. That's in Portland.
Yes. It's right there on Nato and Taylor.
Yeah, okay. And when do you plan to get arrested again?
It's not in my scheduler. I don't know. We'll see what happens on this Saturday.
What's going on this?
That's November 3rd.
November 3rd. What's going on November 3rd?
That's the action against austerity.
Oh, what do you think of that?
I have been doing a lot of reading into economics, and I'm really intrigued by, what Keynesian economics talks about, how when you are going through a recession, the more that you take resources out, capital cannot feed onto itself. And so, it's demonstrative of what's happening in Greece right now, where they had to be bailed out by the IMF because they're going through a currency crisis, and they're issuing all these austerity measures, and people on the streets creating huge amount of havoc. Because you can't just cut everything and expect people to be able to go to work or fix their lives together. Like, people need to actually have these resources to fix their home, repair their car,
feed themselves,
find a job.
over their head.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the more you continue to cut our schools, the more you continue to cut public transportation, the more you continue to cut, services to help people, get homes and all kinds of the basic essentials, the more people are going to suffer. The more you're going to have problems with crime, the more you're going to have problems with people being homeless and all other kinds of stuff. All the issues of societal blight are going to be more expanded the more you start cutting stuff. And so that's why you have activists here in Portland who want to do a big demonstration saying that you need to find a new solution. We need to be more creative because budget cuts help nobody.
I've been notified that we got to take a break, or otherwise they're going to come out here and thump on you and I both. So let's take a break for a few minutes here. We'll be back in a moment. Let's put up some information here for the viewers to see as we take our break, Mr. E. back. For you people who tuned in late, you missed the opening of the show. Conversations with Dr. Don that you're watching is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like Cameron over here, my friend, and we talk about whatever it is that we've decided to talk about earlier on. We were talking about his student activism and other things that come up as we chat. So we were talking about austerity before, and let's go back to that again and what's been happening in Greece. Why is there austerity? Do you know why that is?
Well, we currently live by a social contract where we have budgets, and it's expected that we have a balanced budget, and that so we have to live in between our means. But who establishes those means? That's still the question. How exactly do these means benefit the whole as agreed upon? And so that's where we still have a big debate. Is austerity a good economic strategy?
The question that comes to mind for me is, how is it that there's a certain, you don't like that word, class of people in a country that are very wealthy, and they, no matter what's going on, they still manage to be wealthy and have their enclaves and their castles and all that kind of stuff, and the ordinary citizenry are getting poorer and poorer and poorer. It seems to me that if we have a halfway equal sharing of the wealth of the society, of the nature, then we wouldn't have a need for austerity. If we would probably increase the taxes, have a wealth tax on the ruling elite of, even in our country today, then we wouldn't have a deficit that we have, and we could have a much better society across the board. It's an unequal sharing of the wealth of the nation, and austerity is just a means of the super rich maintaining their riches and becoming richer and richer. It's global now, and it's going to cost us immensely here in this country too. The question in my mind is austerity here going on in America right now? I think austerity has been going on now for some time, and it's going to get worse and worse. And depending on who wins the presidential election, shall we switch over to that? You wanted to talk about the presidential election?
I don't like talking about the presidential election.
Okay. Who are you going to vote for?
I would Barack Obama. But what you were talking about before about, fair taxation, I believe that's only half of the problem.
Okay.
Inequality exists both when it comes to income and also when it comes to business. We have big monopolies still in America, and the more monopolies you have, it's going to lead to these people who are getting richer, while people who can't compete with these monopolies keep getting poorer. So we need to have really strong antitrust measures. We really need to be looking at these 5 too-big-to-fail banks who have such a huge hold on our economy. If they fail, then we're toast. That's a monopoly, and that just shows how big, risky institutions need to be properly regulated, because that's how you actually facilitate a prosperous society. And that's a lot what our founding fathers talked about when they were talking about chartering businesses and issuing money and all the other issues that deal with regulating commerce.
So you mentioned the election earlier on, but you don't want to talk about who you're going to vote for.
I mostly am involved with local races.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
my issue is, there's this certain term called grassroots apathy. And so you get a lot of people who turn out to vote for whoever is going to run for president. But then you get to these, races like governor, senator, legislature, mayor, people that, you have so much more access to, people you have so much more influence on. Those people do not turn out for those elections.
Right.
And so that's been a huge cultural concern for me. I really want to emphasize to people that if you want to make a difference at the top, you need to start at the bottom.
Why did you decide to run for mayor?
So I was involved with Occupy, and I was pretty much everywhere. If something happened, I was there to be a witness of it. I chained myself up to Terry Shunk Plaza to the concrete barrel. I was the witness of the Molotov cocktail incident, which led to Occupy Portland being removed from the downtown parks, Lonsdale and Chapman. And at that point, I was really frustrated and distrustful of the way that our mayor and the city police was handling the situation. And the media also was very biased and did not give, a wholesome or holistic recount of what was happening down there. And that's what prompted me to organizing a demonstration outside of City Hall the day after the supposed eviction was supposed to happen. And a lot of drama happened. The police came in. It was a big show where we had 15,000 people within this very small area, and it was a great night for a lot of people. People look back at that and they feel pride with how they were able to emphasize public power, people really using their feet in democracy. But after that night ended, the police showed up about 12 hours later and then kicked out the 200 people who were still remaining from the night before. So we got to City Hall on Monday. Only about 30 people showed up, and this entire building was on lockdown, so nobody knew what to do at that time. And very fortunately, there was this man named Lauren Parks who was out there, and no one knew who he was. He was just peeking around saying he was curious, and he happened to mention to me that he was running for mayor of Portland. Mm-hmm. So I asked him, wow, well, how does one do that? And he pretty much told me it's easy. You just go inside the office, get some paperwork, get some signatures, and then your name, boom, gets on the ballot. So that's pretty much how it all started.
How did you get to be the kind of a character that you are, such a citizen activist? What happened to you growing up? What was the influence in your childhood or in your life that has you out front, speaking out for justice and what's right? What is it? How'd you come to that conclusion to be that way?
So I actually grew up in Northern Virginia, about 45 minutes away from Washington, D.C. It's probably the highest standard of living in the nation. Virginia has a really great education system, and I was very fortunate that my mother really cared a lot about my upbringing and wanted to make sure that I received a fair chance in the future. And I went to a great school. I was probably one out of two black people in the entire neighborhood. It was a very white neighborhood where most people owned their homes. My family, they were still paying off their mortgage, but everybody else, they worked for the government. They had really great jobs, and they're all well educated, and they all had, a lot of privilege for them. And even though I was growing up with so much potential, so much access, I still had a really abusive relationship with my father. And he was
abusive relationship? Yeah.
He was physically abusive, and Child Protection Services got called on him twice, but that was because of my brother. And after the second time, he ended up leaving and separating from my mother. And the worst part about it was when he decided to actually leave, that meant that he moved into the basement. And so he was still around for about a year while my parents were going through the separation. And after that, he ended up moving in with my godmother, and they ended up getting married. And so, that phase of my life pretty much tore our entire family nucleus apart.
Of course. Yeah.
So, since I was very young, I've really seen both the beauty and the hazard of the world. So I've been able to process that I have these gifts, and I need to make sure that these gifts are being used to produce more good and not contribute harm to the world, because we don't need any more of that.
Say a few words about the Occupy movement. I've heard from some sources that the Occupy movement is waning now. It's going to disappear, like so many other earlier activist movements. What do you think about that?
I don't think in particularly that the Occupy movement is going to disappear. I think that it is currently going through identity crisis. There were so much expectations when it first started. I remember when I first heard about the Occupy Wall Street movement, I thought it was going to change the world. That's why I gave up so much of my life and so much of my energy into this movement. And from there, I've had to change my tactics. I've had to go back into, identity finding mode. And now I've found my own way to address the powers that be, do outreach, and to contribute to a broader movement. But Occupy Portland, they're also in that same position. And they are unique with how they've been able to bring so many diverse people together and then keep them, inspired, keep them involved, and keep them engaged. It's not as visible now because we aren't in physical places, but the affinity groups that I've seen, I probably have to sneeze soon, so thank you. Mm-hmm. The affinity groups that I've seen working to help underwater homeowners stay inside their homes and resist foreclosure, the people that I've seen demonstrate every week at a Wells Fargo or Chase Bank, the people that I've seen work on building community gardens, or people who are creating their own news source so they can have independent media, or people who are doing like the Portland Action Lab. They're still organizing civil disobedience workshops. This would not have happened if we didn't have that congregation a year ago, where people got to meet each other, build a community, establish relationships, and make this something that's not going to go away. It's become so much more resilient. And I believe that that's going to be a much bigger contribution to our society than just a lot of people who are sleeping in a park.
Grassroots, grassroots, grassroots.
Grassroots.
That's what you're about. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts about the presidential debates?
I only got to see the first two. The third one, I was in class for it. I haven't watched it on
that was a great
online
one.
yet. I heard it was great. I really want to see the Rumble one with the Jon Stewart and the guy from Fox Network.
It's funny, yeah.
Yeah. But the first one, apparently Mitt Romney won it. So, Big Bird, that was one that stuck in my mind. That was great.
That was a faux pas on his part.
I don't know. It could have helped him. Apparently he did better in the ratings. So people hate Big Bird. Got that. And the second one, that was a real fun one for me. My favorite part was Mitt Romney said that we just make sure that everyone gets married and then we won't have gun violence anymore. So should have known that.
Yeah. Who's going to win?
Obama.
By how big a margin?
You probably get like 1.5% of the popular vote, advantage over Romney.
I'm afraid that they're going to do some shenanigans like they did in 2004, 2008 and steal the election. What's your thought about that possibility?
I think there are a lot of people watching right now. There are a lot of watchdog groups who probably have your same fear, and I think there's just too many people breathing down the necks of ballot counters. I think that we're going to have a clean election this year. Crossing my fingers and my toes.
What do you think about the governor of Texas, who said that if some foreigner comes into Texas to monitor the electoral process, he's going to do something really bad? I'm not remembering what he said he's going to do, but like secede from the union or something as radical as that. I guess the election monitoring people in international level are going to be sending people to America to monitor our elections to be sure that they're clean. That makes me kind of sad to think that we need to do that here in my country. But what do you think about having foreigners come into our country?
I think independent auditing is by far the one thing that's lacking in our government, and it needs to be anybody outside the United States. Anytime that you get audited, it has to be an outside party. So I think it's rational. Some people, they might get too prideful and think that this is a huge statement, but who else is going to make sure that special interests aren't being catered to? It's got to be international. What
about the voting process with electronic vote counting and paper ballots, and do you think the process now of counting our votes is okay, or shall we go back to what India has been doing now for years successfully, paper ballots?
Look at the button that I have. Demand paper ballots.
Yeah.
I just stole this from a friend who was dressed up with a lot of buttons on, and he was at the bus project party. So this is just random. But I just had a meeting about a week ago with my friend Seth Woolley, who is currently running for Secretary of State of Oregon with the Portland Green Party.
Yes.
And he was mentioning how it's actually cheaper to run elections with a paper ballot checked by human beings than contracting out with people these electronic machines that count our ballots, because they have so many auditing issues, accountability issues, technical problems. The amount of money that we're putting into this system is so much more wasteful than if we just made it simple again and had paper ballots.
But then if we had paper ballots, then the people who own the debode voting machines and all that electronic stuff is going to lose money. So how can we do that?
It's the public good. So maybe you should make your system more efficient and more effective, and we'll have that conversation again. So,
new subject. Is racism existing in our country today?
Of course.
Okay. You ever experience it?
I experience more of the cultural racism nowadays, but I think that we still have problems with the inequality in our criminal justice system. There's been many surveys and scholarly reports that talk about how African Americans, people of color, commit the same amount, or there's an indeterminate difference of the amount of crime committed between Caucasians or whites and people of color. But the incarceration rates do not match that. So there's obviously something happening systemically where if you are a person of color, if you are a low-income person, you are more likely to go to jail for the same crime as someone else who has money or is not a person of color. So that's a huge issue that has not been brought up nationally, that doesn't get even brought up locally. Something needs to be changed about that.
So there is racism existing in this country today?
Yes.
Yeah. Drones. What do you think of drone warfare? Drones.
That's a hard one.
There's two kinds of drones.
There are two kinds of
surveillance drones, and then there's the killer drones. Do you think it's okay to have drones flying over Portland and doing surveillance?
It's a huge civil rights issue. And I've been talking with the ACLU, who have been having these chats with legislatures, with elected officials, and I believe most importantly, we have to establish a common understanding. There should be no sneaking of these issues. I think that they need to be out there in the open. There needs to be full transparency. And if drones come up, the government needs to be very specific about why do we have them here? What are we spying on? Who do we not trust? Because I believe that's still the underlying dialogue that is still missing. What is the purpose? Who are they trying to rat out? And that's where I would talk first. Luckily we don't have any drones yet in Oregon. There might be manufacturing some, but I believe that we are overdue for that conversation.
How about killer drones?
Yeah. I don't think enough people are paying attention to what's happening in Iraq or Afghanistan. People are still feeling wounds from 2011. I still feel wounds. I was, in 5th grade at that time, and I remember how it completely changed my life in one day. And we still are dealing with massive issues of distrust and, excitement about, terrorist plots. And we've even seen, in this past year, the National Defense Authorization Act get, signed into law, which gives the president unprecedented powers when it comes to, incarcerating and imprisoning, American citizens. And let me think about where I was going with that.
Yeah, how about killing American citizens if we think, if the authorities in our country think that they are plotting or they are about to attack? Uh, there's been a substantial resistance to the idea of America having killer drones flying all over the globe and taking out people who they think are terrorists.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate to see all these reports about terrorist stings, and we're successful rooting out these terrorists because the FBI is going out there and trying to see if anybody will have a terrorist thought. And I believe that it is a huge statement about how little we are investing in mental health, but we are willing to invest in spying and throwing out the very specific wording of some language and trying to catch somebody, do a gotcha moment. So I think that we do not have enough emphasis on providing people with the ability to prosper without resorting to crime. And then we are also investing too much on militarization of our police force. We are focused too much on spying and data collecting when we need to remember that the purpose of government is to serve the people, not to spy on them.
What do we need to do about that? I agree with you. What do we need to do to have things be different and the government will not have agent provocateurs and finding people who may have a thought of doing terrorist activity, and then providing them with the explosives or the dummy explosives, and so that they can claim that they're stopping terrorism.
I would talk a little bit about North Dakota right now. I think it's a prime example about what I'm talking about culturally.
Sure.
In 1919, this was a little bit before the Great Depression, you had a lot of agrarian farmers living in North Dakota, and there was a drought, and they had nothing they could do. They wanted loans from the banks so they could, buy more water, get better equipment, and the banks, they didn't want to loan because they didn't care about, rural farmers. How much money can you make off of them? And so what they decided to do is they created a nonpartisan league. So this was completely outside of the two-party system that is, currently dominating every state in our country. And they were able to get someone elected to governor, and they were able to even get a majority in the legislature, all elected from the nonpartisan league. And after they did that in 1919, they established a state bank of North Dakota. And in North America, or in the United States, it is the only publicly owned bank. And since its first beginning, it's been around for about a century now, it's been able to every year give a budget surplus back to the general fund of North Dakota. It is the only state in our entire union that has low default rates on loans, low unemployment rates, low something else, I forget. But it's just demonstrative, again, of how people looking at a local level, really emphasizing what their greatest need is, can make the change happen. How they can make sure that everyone has prosperity, that we focus on the good stuff and we don't get distracted with whatever's happening on the national scale. We need to really look at our own rights and protect those.
So you're suggesting that other states should have national banks?
No, there wouldn't be national banks. There would be state banks.
Pardon me, state banks, of course.
Yeah.
And that way, then the banking business and industry would shrink hugely, huh?
It wouldn't shrink. So, for example, North Dakota, which has a population of about 600,000, which is about the population of the city of Portland. Oregon has a population of about 4 million. They have 30 community banks. North Dakota has 90 community-owned banks. And so like I was talking before about monopolies, the amount of wealth does not go away, but it becomes shared at a much more equitable scale. Everybody is able to start as a stakeholder, and they're able to use that to move forward. And they are able to do that without out-competing or buying someone else out of competition. And so that's something that North Dakota has been able to leverage to make sure that everybody has that equal opportunity.
So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
New subject.
Okay.
What's happening in Syria? What's your solution to what's happening in Syria?
I
know you work on local stuff. You
Yeah.
probably have some idea about the uproar going on in the Middle East and in Syria and in Israel with the Palestinians and the Jews. Any thoughts about what's going on in the Middle East?
I think that it is a scary situation, but I do not do too much research into international politics, so I don't know who is pulling the strings where,
Sure.
who's being unjustly affected too much. So I can't comment too much on what's happening in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm. So if Obama loses and Romney wins, what are you going to do?
The interesting thing that happens at a local level when somebody conservative gets elected as president, that makes our community much more progressive, much more active in fighting for their lives. It's a matter of perception. It's once again referring to what I was talking about culturally. If Romney were to get elected, I'm sure in Oregon we'd see single-payer health care on the ballot. We'd see state bank reform. We'd see campaign finance reform. We'd see people all getting more excited about making sure that we don't have to deal. Like, for example, the Tea Party movement. Barack Obama got elected 2 years later. Boom, all these crazy people with guns and bikinis with the American flag on it and, like, doing all kinds of shenanigans. Like, this is actually how America functions. So, while I do not want Mitt Romney to be president, I know that it's not going to stop me from being an activist, from contributing to my community and making sure that we move forward.
So if I'm hearing you right, if Romney's elected, then things are going to get better for ordinary citizens?
I would not say they would get better, but I would say that the community is going to wake up and get organized, which I think culturally is much more beneficial. But I don't think that it's going to immediately result in income, distribution or anything else that you might find to be more beneficial. So,
what else can we talk about before the time runs out, because we're running out of time? What's useful for us to talk about that would be of interest to our viewers?
Okay.
What would you say to the viewers who are...
Did you know that I'm on the ballot?
Huh?
Did you know that I'm on the ballot?
You're on the ballot today?
Yes. I'm in your ballot. Have you voted yet?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
You better have voted for me.
Yes, of course. You betcha.
Good.
Yeah, you're on the ballot running for...
State treasurer.
State treasurer. Yeah, and if you haven't voted yet, be sure and vote for Cameron Whitten for state treasurer. Please. And you were endorsed by the Progressive Party and... Nominated by the Progressive Party.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you think you're going to do pretty well?
I'll do better than last time.
How did you do last time?
I was a 1%er. I came in 5th, though, out of 23, so it wasn't the worst.
I'm glad you're, and as young as you are, you're out there pushing and punching and for what's right.
Pushing and punching. I don't like those words.
What words would you choose for yourself?
Those a little violent. They're a little combative.
Okay.
I've been really focused on unity.
Mm-hmm.
I want my role to be building relationships and, really eliminating the disconnect that we've seen affect our society.
Okay. So let's see. Look at that camera there and tell the viewers the last message there. We've got about 20 seconds. What do you got to say to the viewers?
Stay healthy.
All right, it's time for us to wind down because we've got to do other things, and it's been delightful in having you aboard tonight again, and it's always good to see you again, and we will see what the future holds for you, and I'll be keeping an eye on you.
You too, Doc.
So it's close to time for us to stop. Keep your pens and pencils handy because you may want to jot down something that we'll show you in the closing credits. Thanks for watching. And give us feedback, both positive and negative. And we got to do some PSAs, public service announcements. That's the first one. We showed you the broadcast schedule a moment ago, and now we're going to show you how to get my shows on the web. Go to www.donbaham.com, click on favorite links, and you can watch my shows there. There's about 200 or so. And the next public service announcement will be coming up here for you to see, and it will be about corporate personhood. To get my shows regularly broadcast by your local public access station, go to www.pegmedia.org. And the next PSA we have is to learn how to end corporate personhood. Go to end corporate personhood. Thanks for watching this episode of Conversation with Dr. Don. My favorite thought for the day is KFC. Not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind. Be friendly and be charitable, especially charitable. Thanks again for watching. Good night.